People rarely admit that they dislike introverts outright, because saying that sounds wrong. So instead, it comes out in softer accusations like, "You are too quiet," "You are hard to figure out," "Why do not you talk anymore?" or "You seem distant." But what they are really saying is, "You do not make me feel at ease." That is the uncomfortable truth people avoid. Most people do not dislike introverts for who they are. They dislike them for what they do not provide. Introverts do not hand out instant validation. They do not offer constant reassurance or non-stop reactions. They do not perform socially on demand. And in a world obsessed with noise, visibility, and constant output, someone who is comfortable in their own inner space can feel threatening. We live in a culture that rewards being seen. The loudest person is assumed to be the most confident. The one who talks the most is assumed to be the most capable. The person who is always on is assumed to be the most likable. So when someone shows up calm, reserved, observant, it disrupts expectations. Humans are trained to read social cues quickly: eye contact, facial expressions, verbal affirmations, nods, laughter, small talk. Introverts often bypass much of this, not out of rudeness, not out of disinterest, but because they do not feel compelled to fill every silence with sound. Silence, however, makes many people deeply uncomfortable. It forces them to hear their own thoughts. In a world driven by fast dopamine and constant stimulation, that is unsettling. Silence does not distract, it exposes, and introverts do not help others escape themselves. For many people, conversation is emotional regulation. Talking keeps anxiety at bay. Talking fills space. Talking reassures them that they are accepted. Introverts do not always play that role. They pause, they think, they listen more than they react. And when they do not respond the way others expect, the other person starts projecting. Are they bored? Did I say something wrong? Why are not they reacting like everyone else? Instead of sitting with that discomfort, people externalize it. They decide the quiet person is the problem. Introverts also disrupt social scripts. There is an unspoken agreement in many interactions. Smile, laugh at the right moments, ask surface-level questions, and, most importantly, pretend to be more interested than you really are. Introverts are generally bad at pretending. They would rather say nothing than say something false. They would rather stay quiet than perform enthusiasm they do not feel. And that honesty can feel like rejection to people who rely on social energy for validation. Neutrality feels like judgment, even when it is not. Introverts are not conserving energy because they disapprove. They are conserving energy because they are wired differently. But in an extroverted world, energy conservation gets misread as arrogance. There is also a widespread myth that quiet equals weakness. Somewhere along the way, confidence became confused with volume. If you speak softly, people assume you lack authority. If you pause before answering, they assume you are unsure. If you do not jump into debates, they assume you have nothing to say. In reality, introverts think more deeply and do not broadcast every passing thought. But modern culture does not reward depth. It rewards speed, hot takes, instant opinions, immediate reactions. Introverts operate on delay. They process first. They want understanding before response, meaning before noise. That delay frustrates people. Frustration turns into irritation, and irritation often turns into dislike. Introverts also make insecure people feel exposed. When one person is constantly talking and another is calm and unreadable, the imbalance becomes uncomfortable. Insecure minds fill the silence with assumptions. They think they are better than me. They are judging everyone. They are stuck up. None of it is true, but insecurity is not interested in truth. It wants comfort. Introverts do not rush to reassure. They do not over-explain. They do not constantly signal approval. And for people who depend on reassurance, that absence feels threatening. There is also a quiet power in silence that people rarely acknowledge. The person who speaks less often controls the pace. They reveal less. They are harder to predict. And people do not like what they cannot read or control, so they label it instead. Antisocial, awkward, cold. Labels reduce uncertainty. It is easier to dismiss an introvert than to accept that not everyone exists to entertain you. Ironically, introverts are often deeply empathetic. They notice subtle shifts in tone. They sense tension. They remember details others forget. They just do not express care loudly. They show it through presence, listening, and consistency. But those qualities are invisible in a culture obsessed with performance. If it is not announced, posted, or verbalized, it is treated as if it does not exist. Introverts do not announce themselves. That is why they are often misunderstood at work too. They speak when they have something meaningful to add. They do not dominate meetings or aggressively self-promote. So they get overlooked, not because they are incapable, but because they do not advertise confidence. And when someone does not advertise themselves, people assume there is nothing there. It is ironic, considering how many thoughtful, strategic minds are introverted. People also dislike introverts, because introverts do not chase approval. They are comfortable alone. They do not rely on constant social reinforcement. That independence threatens people who depend on external validation. If you do not need the group feels less powerful. So instead of respecting that independence, people punish it socially, through exclusion, mockery, or subtle labeling. Here is what introverts need to hear. You are not disliked because something is wrong with you. You are disliked because your presence disrupts how others manage their emotions. And that is not your responsibility. You do not owe entertainment. You do not owe constant enthusiasm. You do not owe fake warmth to make others comfortable. The right people will not need you to perform. They will respect your silence, your insight, and your depth. And the people who dislike you for being introverted were never reacting to you in the first place. They were reacting to their own discomfort. Silence is not a flaw. Calm is not arrogance. Distance is not rejection. Sometimes it is simply someone who knows themselves well enough not to fill every moment with noise. In a world terrified of being alone with its own thoughts, that will always unsettle some people. Let it. You do not exist to be universally liked. You exist to be real. And that will always offend the wrong people.